I'm making a shaving horse out of this Sweetgum log. I got this Sweetgum log for free just down the road. And Sweetgum has a reputation that I'm coming to understand as somewhat of a less desirable, second-rate timber, at least here in the South. I'll get to why that is in a minute, but I'm aiming for 3.5 to, maybe 3 3/4 inch slabs here. I want it to be thick because Sweetgum really doesn't want to dry nicely. It wants to warp and crack, so I'm hoping to avoid that with some thicker slabs. Now, I've done quite a bit of freehand chainsaw milling over the years. That's actually how I got started making lumber and chainsaw milling, which is what I do now. I very rarely freehand anything unless I'm really hard up and just need to get something broken down into movable pieces. Freehand milling is a totally viable way of creating lumber. There's a skill element to it, but here I'm not terribly worried about how the boards come out as long as they're at least somewhat even on either side, because I think the rough nature, the variations will add to the visual appeal of this shave horse. And Sweetgum has a very rustic look to it. It's a very warm wood, very colorful wood too. So we're going to split off the side pieces here, and then I'll have 2 boards from the middle that I'll use to build this shaving horse. But back to Sweetgum. In the South, people hate it. They really do. It drops those Sweetgum balls, and just people hate raking those up and clearing them out of their lawn. So people are taking them down quite a bit around here. But I think it's an interesting species. It's a very important species here in the South. It's one of the first hardwood trees that grow after an area either has a forest fire or is clear cut. First, the weeds and the thorny bushes, they grow, and then give it maybe 20 or so years, and then you'll have some pine that grow, and then maybe 20 or so years after that, maybe a little longer, then you'll have the first poplars and Sweetgum come. And the Sweetgum bring the squirrels, and the squirrels bring the acorns. That's basically how that works. And so after a while, you end up with the oaks and then the hickories, and you have, after about 100 or so years, 150 years, you have a nice developing hardwood stand of trees. So I like Sweetgum so far, within the range, I think, of how it should be used. I mean, riving Sweetgum, the first shave horse I made, I actually split it from a Sweetgum log, and that was such a miserable experience. I'll never do that again. I did get it split, and I did get a functional shaving horse built from it, but I just wasn't happy with it, so I'm redoing it here. I'm marking my leg holes 4 inches from the end and 2 inches from the sides, and I'm eyeballing the angle. What I am trying to do is just keep it consistent. So I just try to pick an angle and then replicate that. I'm not doing much of a rake. Rake is the leg slope out from the ends, and it's going to be okay because this bench is long enough that it'll have really good lateral stability anyways. So we're just getting this hole drilled here. I really like marking with this Rinaldi. This is a $1.50 yardstick from Home Depot. And I imagine it's not terribly accurate, but the thing is, you don't need it to be accurate if it's the only measuring stick that you're using. 36 might not be perfectly 36 on a tape measure or on a folding ruler, but as long as you're marking 36 using that yardstick, it works great. I like it enough that I'm thinking about getting a nice hardwood marking stick, something that I can use, and it'll be a little bit more durable. This is one of my favorite tools. It's a tapered bung auger. Try to say that without laughing. It's a very, very functional tool, a very cool tool. It's a little bit dangerous. You can see my index finger on my right hand. There is a very sharp edge there that catches the hole and provides a taper. And it's sharp. This was made out of first-rate steel. I had to buy a couple of, or actually had them on hand. If you buy this tool, you'll need to get a set of small diamond, maybe call them finger files, to really slide it in there. Otherwise, you could use a file, but you won't get a very good edge with a file, and the slot is narrow enough that even the thin Arkansas stones won't get in there. So you'll need some kind of diamond sharpening implement to get in there. But once it's sharp, wow, does it ever work? And the security, the strength that a tapered mortise provides is just leagues beyond a straight drilled mortise. So I'm marking the end here now. What I am going to do is just cut a straight dowel on the leg. And I'm doing that purely because this slab is so wet. You'll see it later when I drilled the holes. The moisture was actually running out of the log as the drill compressed the wood. So this is very, very wet. I don't think there would be any point in doing a through tenon with a wedge right now with the log being so wet. So what I'm doing gives me the freedom later on to drive those legs in deeper as the slab dries, and then I can wedge it later if I need to. This is another one of my favorite tools. This is a dowel maker, also from the 1800s. I love these old tools. They're just incredible. Both of these tools are from the 1800s, and to think that I am still using them 140, maybe even 150 years later, I just get such a kick out of it. I looked up the James Swan Company, and it looks like their last patent was in 1886. So you can assume that they probably went defunct in the 1890s or so. And their earliest patent goes into I believe, the 1860s. So it's just a wonderful company. To think that we used to have a country filled with these highly innovative, highly capable companies. We just had them all over the place, and they were producing these tools that 150 years later, potentially, are still able to be used functionally. There's nothing wrong with either of those tools. The dowel maker works wonderfully, and so does the reamer. It works great for chairs, furniture, staked furniture. I mean, staked furniture is how we have been making furniture for thousands and thousands of years. We've got staked furniture going practically back to the Bronze Age. So here is one of my own creations. This is a frame saw that I made out of a couple of pieces of rived oak and some walnut handle laminations. This is, I think, my third frame saw, and I'm happiest with it. I ended up adding the laminations because with straight pieces for the ends there, the amount of tension that you need to get a good straight cut is far more tension than a mortise going through the frame will allow you to have. If you want a good connection, you have to mortise, but if you mortise, any lateral movement is going to split your sides out. So I have found that the way to build a really good frame saw is to add laminations on the side that gives you a nice, solid, robust mortise, and then you can just crank on it. You can crank to tighten that spindle on the top and not worry about blowing out the sides of your mortise. Today's just, I guess, going to be maybe a tool show and tell. I'm using this Commander wood maul. Oops, there we go. To split in, to drive in my legs. This is a hickory head. I chainsawed out that head from one of the toughest pieces of hickory I've ever split. And if I find a really gnarly, like a crotch piece or maybe something that's got just a lot of spiral grain, I've taken to selecting those out to make mallets and things of that nature. And it really works well. I've got a couple of band clamps around it. I did put glue on the ends, and it's just holding up real well. It's a joy to use. Now I'm carving a mortise, and this is going to be the last thing that I'll show today because I'm already almost 20 minutes long. I'm using a 1-inch framing chisel, and I think what I'm going to do is have a 3-inch long mortise and maybe an inch or slightly better in width. And that's going to allow a lot of freedom there, a lot of range of motion. You want to make your mortise quite a bit bigger than the post that you end up putting through there because you want to be able to clamp down very small pieces, but then have room in the throat for very large pieces. And so you want full range of motion. I did move the shaving horse onto the deck, and I did level the legs, which I did off camera. So you'll see here what I'm going to do after marking out the lines of the mortise. I'm just going to drill them out. That's so much easier than chopping out a mortise. I'll put 3 holes in there. I'm using a 1-inch bit here. You can see how nice Sweetgum carves. That's the thing that really surprised me. It won't split. I mean, it just if you make furniture parts out of Sweetgum, I think you'll be really happy because there's virtually a 0 chance of splitting the piece that you're driving a leg into. But the flip side of that is you're not going to split it. You're going to have to saw it. So I think there are some trade-offs with Sweetgum. I think it does have its place. I will tell you, I saw a Sweetgum table about a year ago at a guy's place that was phenomenal. It was absolutely gorgeous. I'd never seen a wood quite like Sweetgum. It finished in a way that was just rich and colorful and warm. I really liked that table. It was totally beautiful. The guy had kind of butchered it a little bit, though. You know, he used a belt sander and a palm sander to flatten the table, and there were ripples in it, and it just didn't. He didn't quite have the equipment to make that table as special as I think the wood could have made it. And that, I think he probably got thrown off by how soft Sweetgum is. I mean, you can really sand through it. I've never sanded Sweetgum, but I can imagine you could make divots really easily if you're not careful with a belt sander with a 80 or 120 grit paper on there. But it carves wonderfully. It's just fantastic to carve. This mortise was very easy to make. Just chopping out the ends there. This chisel has a very short handle, which I really like. It allows me to find plumb easier. It has a short handle and a long tang. I don't know what, probably the tang is what makes sense to me on this tool. It is a socket chisel, but I don't know what else to call the longer part of the chisel. And here I did decide to go even just a little bit longer. So I'm drilling out one last section there. And look at the moisture drip. If you can see that. I could sure see it while I was drilling. It was running moisture as the bit compresses the wood there. And my camera angle here isn't perfect. I thought I was centered a little bit better. So but here's how nice that carves. Can get really nice deep score lines there. All right, so part 2 is coming up. The next part is going to be finishing the shave horse. I'll be adding a few boards to the top and making the clamp head. So that video is coming out probably in the next few weeks. So keep an eye out for that if you enjoyed this one. And I appreciate everybody following me along here. I'm going to try to do more project videos. I'm going to get better at it. So if this one wasn't what you hoped for, hang in there, and the next one's going to be a lot better.